Rian Keller felt the pressure of the galaxy the moment the convoy entered the dark sector. The stars outside the view panels looked cold and sharp like broken glass, and every shadow felt alive. He kept his hand close to his rifle as he walked beside the two Aurelian princesses, Lyra and Ceres. Their silver cloaks glowing softly under the corridor lights. They were supposed to be safe under human escort. They were supposed to be untouchable. But nothing felt safe tonight. The alarms began without warning. A deep metallic howl that shook the walls and vibrated through Rian's bones. The floor tilted as the convoy ship lurched under enemy fire. Blue plasma streaks tore across the hull. Lights flickered. People screamed. The entire corridor became a storm of chaos. Rian grabbed Ceres before she fell, her small hands trembling against his armor. Lyra stumbled backward as smoke burst from an overhead pipe. He reached out without thinking, pulling her close as a section of the ceiling crashed down. The sound of explosions echoed like thunder, and Rian realized the worst almost instantly. This wasn't a random pirate attack. Someone knew exactly where the princesses were. Someone wanted them cornered. He pulled them both behind a thick support pillar as energy bolts sizzled through the air, casting violent flashes across their faces. "We need to move now," Rian said in a steady voice, though his heart was beating like a war drum. Lyra nodded sharply, eyes fierce even through shock. Ceres clung to him, trying to match his breath. They sprinted down the corridor as the ship groaned like a wounded beast. Smoke poured out from broken vents, sparks rained from shattered lamps, and the red emergency lights painted everything in a haunting glow. Another blast hit the side of the convoy. The metal trembled under their feet. A section of the walkway split apart. Ceres slipped forward with a cry. Rian grabbed her waist and pulled her up before she vanished into the fiery gap below. Lyra reached for him, dust covering her silver hair. "This way?" she shouted, pointing toward the emergency hatch. But before they could reach it, a squad of masked pirates blocked the path, their armor marked with strange symbols. Symbols Rian had never seen on common raiders. The pirates aimed their weapons at the princesses, and everything inside Rian froze for a single burning second. Then he moved, fast and fierce like every instinct he ever trained for. He shoved Lyra aside, grabbed a fallen metal panel, and used it as a shield as the pirates opened fire. The blast slammed into the panel, sparks flying inches from his face. He pushed forward, slamming the panel into the nearest pirate, sending him crashing into two others. Ceres screamed his name as more shots lit the corridor. Rian drew his rifle in one fluid motion and fired, each shot precise, controlled, deadly. The corridor filled with flashes of blue and red light. The smell of burned metal and fear spread through the air. Lyra helped drag Ceres behind cover, her hands shaking but her eyes determined. Rian fought until the last pirate fell, armor dented, weapons clattering to the floor. The silence that followed felt strange and heavy, like the ship itself was holding its breath. Rian turned to the princesses, checking them for wounds. Ceres looked pale, her voice barely a whisper. "Why did they come for us?" Lyra stepped closer, her voice low. "This was planned." Before Rian could answer, the convoy's emergency announcer crackled through the speakers, ordering all survivors to head to the docking bay for evacuation. Rian guided the princesses through the ruined corridors, stepping over fallen beams, shattered glass, and lifeless bodies. Every turn felt like walking deeper into danger. Smoke curled around them like ghostly fingers. The air grew hotter, the metal groaned louder. Just when they reached the final hallway, another explosion ripped the ceiling apart. The hatchway collapsed. Metal debris crashed down like a falling mountain. Lyra stumbled as flaming fragments blocked their only escape. The heat surged forward like a wave. Ceres coughed, struggling to breathe. Rian didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lyra's wrist firmly, the touch warm through her sleeve. He lifted Ceres into his arms as the fire roared closer, the entire world behind them collapsing in a wall of flame and smoke. He ran through the choking heat, the princesses holding onto him as if he were their only hope left in the universe. They burst into the docking bay just as the emergency shuttle doors slid open. Guards rushed to help the princesses. Medics shouted orders. Alarms screamed. The last survivors hurried inside. The moment they stepped off the ramp, a group of towering Aurelian lawkeepers surrounded Rian, their armor gleaming with gold sigils, their spears glowing with ancient energy. One of them spoke in a deep, echoing voice. "Human soldier Rian Keller, you have touched the royal daughters. Lyra and Saris in crisis." Rian frowned, confused as smoke drifted behind him. "I saved them. You touched them," the lawkeeper repeated. "By the Aurelian Code 97, you are bound as husband protector until the throne decides otherwise." The princesses stiffened in shock. Rian felt the world tilt for the second time that night, not from explosions, but from the weight of a law he had never heard of. A law that felt ancient, dangerous, and suddenly very real. And somewhere in the shadows of the docking bay, a noble figure watched with a slow, cold smile, as if everything had happened exactly the way he wanted. Rian stood frozen as the lawkeeper's words echoed through the smoke-filled docking bay. His mind raced to understand a law he had never heard of, a rule that felt older than the stars outside the shattered convoy ship. Lyra and Saris stared at him with wide eyes, their faces pale under the flickering emergency lights, and the silence around them grew heavy like a closing cage. Rian stepped forward with controlled calm, trying to keep his voice steady even though his pulse hammered against his ribs. "I touched them to save their lives," he said. "You can't call that anything else." But the lawkeeper simply lowered his glowing spear, the gesture firm and absolute. "In Aurelian Code," the lawkeeper said, "touch during crisis is a sacred bond." His voice carried the weight of ancient tradition, each word measured like a judgment. "You are their husband protector until the High Court gives a final ruling." Saris took a breath like someone trying not to cry, her hands twisting together nervously. Lyra stepped in front of her sister, protective even in her shock. "There must be an appeal," she said sharply. "No one enforces Code 97 without a council vote." But the lawkeeper shook his head slowly, smoke drifting around his golden helmet. "Emergency conditions remove the right to appeal," he said. "The court convenes at dawn." Rian felt a strange pull inside his chest, not of fear, but of responsibility. The memory of heat, fire, and collapsing metal still burned behind his eyes. He had refused to let these girls die, and now the galaxy had twisted his choice into something he did not understand. Guards escorted them through a long corridor glowing with blue light, the walls smooth like crystal and almost humming with an energy Rian could feel in his bones. Saris walked beside him, sneaking glances at his face as if searching for answers he didn't have. Lyra walked on the other side, her shoulders stiff, her voice cold but trembling beneath the surface. "You didn't know the law," she said softly. "No human would. Most Aurelians barely remember it." Rian looked at her. "Then why enforce it now?" Lyra hesitated, her eyes shifting to the distant shadows of the palace hall ahead. "Someone wanted this," she whispered. "Someone who benefits from binding you to us." They entered a circular chamber where attendants examined Rian's armor, scanning him for injuries, removing debris from the convoy blast. But their eyes kept drifting to him with curiosity and unease. Humans were known as Deathworlders, beings forged in harsh conditions, strong, fast, unpredictable. Now one stood touched to their princesses, and rumors spread like wildfire in every whisper that echoed through the crystal halls. An elderly advisor approached, robes flowing like river water. He bowed to the princesses but paused before Rian. "The court will question intent," he said gravely. "They will ask why a human reached for royalty." Rian clenched his jaw. "Because they were about to die." The advisor nodded as if expecting that answer. "Intent matters not to the old code," he said. "Only contact during crisis." Then he looked at Lyra and Saris, his eyes filled with a sorrow that hinted at buried history. The law was made in dark times, to bind loyalty, to prevent betrayal, to create obligation that could not be broken. The princesses exchanged a troubled glance. Rian felt the tension like a storm gathering around them. A law meant to protect was now a chain wrapped around all three. They were escorted to a waiting chamber filled with soft white light, the walls glowing like starlight trapped in stone. Rian sat on a low bench, elbows on his knees, staring at his hands. Hands that had pulled them through fire. Hands that had now dragged him into a fate he never asked for. Lyra sat across from him, strong and composed, though her fingers tapped nervously against her knees. "Rian," she said quietly, "if the court binds you permanently to the role, it won't be simple." Saris sat beside her, her voice gentler. It's not marriage the way humans understand it, she said. It's duty protection, a vow that ties your life to ours. Rian lifted his gaze, meeting their eyes. I didn't save you because of duty, he said. I saved you because it was right. A soft warmth touched Ceres's face at his words. Lyra looked away for a moment, hiding a moment, hiding a small shake in her breath. The emotions in the room felt deep, tangled, too big for any of them to hold alone. Before they could speak further, the chamber doors opened. The lawkeepers returned, their glowing spears lighting the floor in golden patterns. The court summons you, the leader said. All three. As they walked toward the high court hall, the palace grew darker, the air colder, the silence heavier. Shadows clung to the corners like secrets, and high above, the carved ceiling showed scenes of ancient battles and forgotten kings. Scenes where the Aurelian law was forged in blood and fear. Rian's steps echoed louder than the others, each one pulling him deeper into a fate he did not choose. Lyra walked close to him, her shoulder brushing his arm as if reminding him he was not alone. Ceres's hand lightly touched the edge of his cloak, a silent plea for strength. Together they entered the grand hall, thousands of eyes watching, nobles whispering, banners shifting in a cold breeze that didn't belong indoors. At the far end, a tall figure stood on a raised platform, robes dark as night, a smirk carved on his face like he had waited for this moment. Lord Veith, the one who had watched Rian earlier, the one whose gaze now burned with triumph. Rian felt the truth hit him like a blade. This was all planned. Every moment, every step, every law twisted to trap him. And now the court would decide his fate, the princess's freedom, and the destiny of all three. The court hall felt colder than space itself, a vast chamber of crystal pillars and floating lights that shimmered like trapped stars. Yet none of that beauty could warm the tension rising around Rian, Lyra, and Ceres as they stood before the judge's throne. Thousands of eyes watching, waiting, whispering about the human who touched the royal daughters and the ancient law that had suddenly awakened after generations of silence. Rian felt the weight of those whispers push against his spine, but he kept his shoulders straight, his breath steady, his eyes forward. Lyra stood beside him with calm strength. Though her fingers curled tightly at her sides, Ceres trembled slightly, not from fear of Rian, but from the fear of what the court might do to him. Lord Veith stepped into the center with slow, confident steps, his dark robes trailing behind him like living shadows. He bowed to the judges with false grace, then turned toward the crowd, his voice deep and smooth as he spoke. Honored court, today we face a grave matter, he said. Our royal daughters were touched by a human in the midst of chaos, and by Code 9-7, he must take the role of husband protector. The crowd murmured, the echo spreading like ripples across a lake. Rian clenched his jaw at Veith's tone, every word twisted to paint him as an intruder rather than a savior. Lyra stepped forward, her voice sharp. He saved us, she said. He acted with honor, not intention. Veith smiled, a cold, poisonous smile. Intent does not matter, he said. The code stands. One of the judges, an older woman with silver markings along her temples, raised her hand, silencing the hall. Bring forth the evidence, she commanded. Holograms lit up around the courtroom, showing shattered corridors, explosions, the princesses stumbling in the fire, Rian rushing to protect them, lifting Ceres, gripping Lyra's wrist to pull her away from falling metal. The images played slowly, magnified, scrutinized, every touch glowing under the court's focus. Ceres's eyes filled with tears as she watched Rian carrying her, his armor burning, his face strained with desperation to save them. Lyra's jaw tightened, her voice cracking through the silence. You see his intent? She whispered. You see he meant no claim. But Veith raised a hand and the hologram shifted to show ancient Aurelian texts, symbols older than most planets in the system. The law was written in an age of betrayal, he said. Royal blood was hunted, and only a binding vow protected them. The law did not judge intent, it judged contact, and that contact now ties this human to our crown. Rian felt a chill slide down his spine. It wasn't the law that frightened him. It was Veith's hunger. The way his eyes gleamed like someone reaching for power hidden behind tradition. Another judge asked Rian to step forward, his voice calm. "Human soldier, do you deny that you touched the princesses?" Rian nodded once, steady and fearless. "I don't deny anything you saw," he said. "But the reason matters. I was trying to keep them alive." Veith spread his arms dramatically. "And now he seeks to twist the law for personal gain," he said. "He saved them, yes, but now he wishes to escape the consequences." A wave of anger surged in Rian's chest, but before he could speak, Lyra stepped in front of him, her voice sharp enough to cut the silence. "He has no desire to claim us," she said. "The only ones twisting the law are those who forced its activation." Saras nodded, tears glimmering. "This law was not supposed to be used like this," she whispered. "Someone wanted it used." Veith's eyes flicked toward her with a flash of irritation. A slip he quickly hid, but Rian saw it. Lyra saw it. Saras saw it. And for the first time they felt the truth tightening around them like a net. The judge turned her gaze toward Veith. "Lord Veith," she said, "you called for immediate enforcement of the code. Why?" Veith bowed gracefully. "For the safety of the crown," he said. "The law is designed to prevent scandal, to protect the princesses from any foreign influence." Rian watched him closely and noticed something small but important, an emblem on his sleeve, half hidden beneath his robes, a mark he had seen before, on one of the pirate armors during the convoy attack, a symbol he had mistaken for a scuff or burn in the chaos, but now it glowed faintly under the hall lights. His heart pounded, a realization hitting him like a blade of ice. Veith was connected, somehow, to the attack. But proving that in this chamber would take more than instinct. It would take evidence, time, and trust from the princesses. Trust he could see forming slowly like fragile light between them. The judges retreated to confer, leaving the court in tense silence. Lyra leaned close to Rian and whispered, "We have to uncover the truth," her voice trembling with urgency. "This law wasn't triggered by accident." Saras stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm gently. "If Veith gains control, he'll use this law to control us," she whispered. "To control you?" Rian felt something shift in him, a new purpose burning behind his ribs. He had saved them once from fire and collapsing metal. Now he would have to save them from politics, lies, and a man who hid daggers behind smiles. The judges returned. The hall quieted. Every soul inside leaned forward, holding their breath. "The human will remain bound under Code 9-7, the lead judge declared, "until the truth of the attack is investigated." Veith bowed in triumph. Rian felt the chain of fate tighten around him. The princesses stepped closer, standing like shields at his side. And in that moment, Rian understood something deep and unspoken. Whatever storm was coming, whatever truth hid behind the ancient law, whatever danger creeped through the Aurelian court, he and the two princesses were now bound not just by law, but by destiny. And the galaxy had only begun to show its teeth. The glass city looked peaceful from a distance, its towering crystal spires shining like frozen lightning against the deep night sky. But Rian could feel a storm rising beneath that beauty, a tension that twisted every breath around him as he walked beside Lyra and Saras through the palace balcony that overlooked the city. The air cold, the silence sharper than any blade. The court's decision still echoed in his mind, binding him to the princesses until the truth behind the attack was uncovered, binding him under a law he never chose. But the weight he carried now felt different, heavier, more personal. Veith's smug smile during the verdict lingered in his memory like poison, and every instinct in Rian's body told him that the noble was planning something far worse. Lyra stood with her hands on the railing, her face lit by the glow of city lights, her eyes narrowed with frustration. "They tied us in chains with a single sentence," she whispered, and half the nobles looked relieved. Saras stood closer to Rian, her voice soft. "They fear change, they fear truth. They fear anyone who stands outside their control," she said. "That's why Veith wants you under the law. He wants leverage over us." Rian nodded. He wanted Code 9-7 to activate. He said quietly, "The attack was no coincidence." The princesses exchanged a look, fear flickering across their faces. But beneath it Rian saw something stronger, a growing determination that made his chest tighten. They were not fragile royal daughters who wanted someone else to solve their problems. They were fighters in their own ways, and now they were ready to uncover the truth with him. Before Rian could speak again, a distant explosion broke the stillness. A sharp burst of blue fire from deep within the glass city. Alarms wailed across the palace, lights blazed through the sky, and as they watched, a second explosion erupted, scattering shards of glass-like energy into the wind. Attack! Lyra breathed, her voice tight with shock. Guards stormed the balcony, urging the princesses to retreat. But Rian stepped forward, his voice calm yet commanding. "Which district was hit?" he asked, gripping the nearest guard by the arm. "The Lower Spire Network," the guard answered breathlessly. "Unknown drones are swarming the streets." Rian's heart clenched. This wasn't random. It was too precise, too fast after the court ruling. Someone wanted the city to break before truth could be exposed. Someone wanted chaos to hide their crimes. Lyra grabbed Rian's arm, her eyes blazing with something fierce. "You know this isn't a normal attack," she said. "We can't hide in the palace." Saras nodded, fear trembling in her breath but courage steady in her gaze. "If Veeth is behind this, he will use the chaos to gain control," she whispered. "We have to act now." Rian didn't argue. He didn't even breathe for a moment. He simply nodded and followed them through the palace halls as the alarms wailed louder. Guards shouting, civilians scrambling for safety. The world outside their windows turning into a battlefield of flickering lights and rising smoke. They reached the lower training hall where weapons gleamed under cold white lights. Rian grabbed a rifle, checking its power cells, his movements fast and precise. Lyra took a slender blade with glowing markings, her hands steady. Saras picked a compact pulse pistol, her eyes determined. The door to the outside opened with a rush of cold wind. The night smelled of smoke and burning metal. Screams echoed faintly, and the sky above the glass city flickered with shadows of fast-flying drones. Rian moved first, leading them down the cascading steps of the palace toward the crystal streets. The ground trembled under their feet as another blast erupted, scattering debris across the glowing walkways. The city that once shined like a star now looked like a fractured mirror, broken and wounded. Drones swooped down, firing streams of plasma. Rian aimed and shot them with sharp precision, each blast lighting the night. Lyra leapt beside him, her blade slicing through a drone that came too close, sparks exploding like fireworks. Saras ducked behind a fallen barrier, firing carefully, her shots hitting targets with surprising accuracy. The three of them moved in perfect rhythm, a strange harmony formed by danger, trust, and the unspoken bond formed in fire and crisis. Rian realized they were no longer acting like protector and royalty. They were acting like a single unit, a family born from survival. As they pushed deeper into the city, Rian noticed something troubling. The drones were not random. They were targeting specific buildings, communications hubs, data towers, places that stored information Veeth would want erased before it exposed him. "We're being led away from the truth," Rian said, his voice low. "Someone wants us to chase chaos while they destroy evidence." Lyra's eyes widened. "The signal vault," she whispered. "If Veeth destroys that, he erases every trace of his involvement." Saras stepped closer, gripping Rian's arm. "Then we go there," she said, her voice breaking but her courage unshaking. They sprinted through the burning streets, weaving through crowds of terrified citizens, dodging collapsing bridges and falling crystal shards, the heat from nearby fires burning against their skin, the smell of smoke filling their lungs. But none of them slowed down, none of them faltered. At the edge of the district, they reached a high vantage point overlooking the signal vault, a grand tower of glowing blue energy that pulsed like a beating heart, and around it, dozens of drones circled like predators guarding a kill. Lyra stared in horror. "If that tower falls, Veeth wins," she whispered. Rian tightened his grip on his weapon, his jaw set, his voice steady even in the rising storm around them. "Then it doesn't fall," he said. "Not tonight." Saras took a shaky breath, her eyes shining in the firelit darkness. "Together," she said softly, and as the three of them stepped forward into the chaos of drones, fire, and rising danger, the night around them felt alive, the fate of the city trembling in the balance, the truth on the edge of being erased forever. But Rian knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not let them lose. Not the princesses. Not the truth. Not the fragile hope forming between them. Not while he still had breath to fight. The night around the signal vault burned like a dying sun. Explosions shaking the crystal streets as Rian charged forward with Lyra and Saris at his sides. The sky was alive with swarming drones, spinning lights, and trails of plasma that curved through the air like angry comets. But Rian didn't slow. He pushed through fire and chaos with one truth burning in his chest. They had to reach the tower before Veith erased every piece of evidence that could save the princesses, the city, and even Rian himself. The ground trembled under their boots as they sprinted down a shattered walkway, bits of glowing debris falling like broken stars around them. Saris stumbled for a moment when the earth cracked beneath her feet, but Rian grabbed her arm, steadying her with a gentle strength that made her breathe again. Lyra swung her blade with fierce precision, cutting down a drone that swooped too close, sparks bursting in a shower of white and blue before scattering across the pavement like falling snow. As they reached the base of the tower, the air grew hotter, the walls vibrating with an unnatural hum. The signal vault pulsed with energy, sending waves of light through the streets like the heartbeat of the entire city. Rian pressed a hand to the side of the structure, feeling the raw power beneath his fingers, every instinct inside him screaming that they were running out of time. "We're too late," Saris whispered, pointing toward the upper levels where a faint glow of red symbols flickered through the transparent panels. Lyra's eyes widened, her voice sharp with urgency. "That's a purge sequence," she said. "Veith is wiping everything." Rian felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. Anger not for himself but for the princesses. For the way their freedom was being stolen in silence, hidden behind lies and noble arrogance. He turned toward them, his voice steady and firm. "We still have a chance," he said. "But once we go inside, you listen to me and stay close." Lyra nodded without hesitation, her jaw tight with determination. Saris swallowed fear and stepped forward, placing her hand over Rian's. "We trust you," she whispered, and those 3 words struck him deeper than any weapon ever could. They entered through a cracked maintenance hatch, the inside of the tower glowing with swirling blue streams of data, holographic symbols drifting in the air like floating ashes. The walls hummed with shifting frequencies that made the air tremble around them, each step echoing like footsteps inside a living giant. They climbed a narrow, spiraling passageway lit by flashing red lights, the purge sequence growing stronger with every level they crossed. The deeper they went, the more Rian sensed the tower pulsing in panic, as if it knew it was dying. At one point, a burst of static energy shot across the corridor, forcing Rian to shield the princesses with his body as sparks hissed against his armor. Saris grabbed his sleeve, her voice trembling. "Rian, you can't take all the damage." He gave her a small, tired smile. "I've taken worse," he said softly. "But I won't let anything touch you." They reached the main data chamber, a vast circular hall filled with towers of transparent conduits where glowing information streams raced like lightning trapped behind glass. In the center stood the purge core, a tall structure bathed in crimson light, runes shifting across its surface like living scars. Veith's voice echoed from the automated speakers, smooth and venomous even in recorded form. "The truth belongs to those who shape it, not those born into it," he said. "Let the past burn so a stronger future may rise." Lyra clenched her fists, her voice cracking with fury. "He wants to erase everything," she said. "Every lie, every bribe, every connection to the pirates." Rian stepped forward, studying the runes as they pulsed with increasing intensity. He could almost feel the tower bleeding information away, the truth slipping through their fingers with each passing second. Saris moved toward a side console, her fingers flying over the glowing symbols, her timid voice replaced by sharp focus. "I can stall the purge," she said, "but only if someone reroutes the primary circuits manually." Rian stepped beside her. "Tell me where." Saris pointed to a high platform halfway up the chamber, floating on a thin energy bridge that flickered dangerously. Lyra stared at it, her voice heavy with realization. "If the bridge collapses, you'll fall straight into the core," she said. "It'll disintegrate you before you hit the bottom." Rian didn't hesitate. He turned to both princesses, his voice low and steady. I'm going anyway. Lyra reached out and grabbed his wrist, her eyes shining with fear and something deeper. You don't owe us your life, she said, her breath unsteady. No law can demand that. Rian met her gaze. This isn't about law, he said quietly. This is about doing what's right. He stepped onto the narrow energy bridge, the hum beneath his feet shaking with unstable force. Each step felt like walking on lightning, but he kept moving, the purge core glowing brighter with every heartbeat. Below him, Saris shouted updates, her fingers flying across the console, her voice trembling but unwavering. Rian, the purge speed is increasing. You have 60 seconds. Lyra stood guard beside her sister, slicing down drones that broke through the chamber doors, her blade leaving arcs of light in the air. She fought like her soul was burning. Like losing Rian meant losing something irreplaceable. Rian reached the upper node, sparks flying around his hands as he pulled out cables and rerouted energy streams. The bridge trembled violently, data lightning ripping across the room. Saris cried out, 30 seconds. He connected the last conduit with a grunt, electricity surging through the tower until the red glow shattered into a wave of blue light that washed over the entire chamber. The purge halted, the truth saved. Lyra caught her breath, her voice trembling with relief. Rian, she whispered, but before they could celebrate, a distant explosion shook the entire tower. The walls cracked, alarms screamed, and the floor beneath them shifted like a breaking spine. The tower had been hit from outside. Someone wanted the vault destroyed even if the purge failed. Rian sprinted back across the trembling bridge as debris rained from above. Saris reached out with both hands, tears streaking her cheeks as she screamed his name. Lyra moved beside her, eyes wide with terror, and Rian leapt just as the bridge shattered behind him, grabbing the edge of the platform with both hands while the core exploded in a burst of blue flame below. He dangled there for a breathless moment, pain shooting through his arms, and then Lyra and Saris reached down together, grabbing him, pulling him up with trembling strength and desperate determination. As the tower collapsed around them, all three fell into each other's arms, breathing hard, covered in dust and flickering light, but alive. Rian looked at them with a fierce promise burning in his gaze. This isn't over, he said, every word heavy with truth. Veeth just started a war. The signal vault collapsed behind them in a storm of screaming metal and blue fire, its fragments shooting into the night like shards of a dying star. Rian shielded the princesses as the shockwave rippled across the street, the heat washing over them until the air itself seemed to shiver. Lyra pulled Saris close, her breath unsteady but her gaze sharp. Rian looked at the burning tower with a cold certainty forming in his chest. Veeth had gone too far, and now there was no doubt left. This was. Or, they moved through the smoke-filled streets, the city trembling under a new wave of explosions that lit the horizon. People ran in panic, alarms wailed, and the crystal roads shimmered with fractures that spread like spiderwebs under their feet. Rian kept the princesses close, scanning every shadow, every rooftop, every flicker of movement. Each breath felt heavier than the last, the world tightening around them, as if the entire city was bracing for something even worse. Lyra held her blade low, the glowing edge reflecting fear and determination in her eyes. Veeth is burning the city? She whispered, her voice shaking with fury. He wants to erase everything we could use against him. Saris wiped tears from her dust-covered face, but her jaw was set with a bravery that made Rian's chest ache. He wants Mother isolated, she whispered. He wants the throne before morning. Rian placed a steady hand on her shoulder. He won't win, he said softly. Not while you're still standing. They reached an abandoned transit tunnel, its metal doors torn apart, sparks dancing along the shattered edges. Inside the tunnel, the air was colder, quieter, filled with the distant echoes of the city's pain above. The three moved deeper, their footsteps echoing through the empty passage like a heartbeat in a sleeping beast. At the end of the tunnel, a secret lift waited behind a cracked panel. Lyra pried it open, revealing a vertical chute that descended into darkness. She looked back at Rian with a faint, tired smile. Mother told us about this place, she whispered. A hidden path to the underspire chambers. They climbed down into the shadows, the faint hum of old machinery guiding them until the tunnel widened into a cavernous hall beneath the city, glowing with faint blue crystals that pulsed like veins of light in the dark stone. At the far end stood the Queen's private refuge, its grand doors slightly open. Rian felt the weight of the moment settle over them. A mix of dread and hope curling through the air. Lyra and Saris rushed forward, pushing the heavy doors open. Inside, Queen Avarice sat on a low throne, her face pale, her breath shallow, her once brilliant eyes dimmed with exhaustion. But when she saw her daughters, a soft smile touched her lips. She reached toward them weakly, and they fell to their knees at her feet, tears slipping silently down their cheeks. Rian stood back for a moment, giving them the space they needed. The Queen's voice was soft and cracked with pain. "My brave stars," she whispered. "I feared I had lost you." Lyra gripped her mother's hands tightly, her voice breaking. "Veith is trying to destroy everything. He attacked the vault. He tried to purge the truth." The Queen closed her eyes slowly, as if each word cut deeper than the last. "I know," she whispered. "I felt the city tremble." She looked at Rian then, her gaze searching, weary, but strong in spirit. "Human soldier," she said softly. "You pulled my daughters from death, and now you pull truth from fire." Rian bowed his head. "I only did what was right." The Queen let out a slow, trembling breath. "This law that binds you," she whispered. "It was meant to protect the royal daughters in a time of war, but for generations the nobles twisted it into a weapon." She looked at her girls, her voice cracking with guilt. "I tried to end Code 9 7 years ago, but Veith and the nobles blocked every attempt." Saris leaned closer, her eyes full of fear and hope. "Then we break it now," she said. "Tell us how." The Queen trembled, her voice barely a whisper. "The law can only be changed if the decree is broadcast through the Signal Vault's truth channels. But now the vault is broken." Rian felt the tension snap inside him like a wire. "Then we find another way," he said. "There must be another system, a secondary channel, anything." Lyra's eyes widened. "The old relay stations?" she breathed. "The ones deep under the city. They were built before the vault. They're forgotten, unguarded." Saris grabbed Rian's sleeve. "We can send the decree from there," she whispered. "We can show the people the truth, the pirate symbols, the purge attempt, everything." The Queen looked at them with tired pride. "If you do this," she whispered, "you will start a revolution." A loud blast erupted overhead, dust falling from the ceiling as the underspire shook with violent force. Distant shouts echoed through the tunnels. The Queen's guards rushing outside with weapons raised. Veith's forces were already coming. The Queen struggled to sit upright, her voice urgent. "Go now," she said. "Rewrite the law, free my daughters from this chain, and free the city from Veith's grip." Rian stepped closer, lowering himself so his eyes met hers. "I will protect them," he said. "Not because of the law, but because it's the right thing, and because no one deserves chains." The Queen smiled faintly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Human or Aurelian, the heart knows truth when it sees it." Another explosion shook the chamber, closer this time, the echo sharp and violent. Lyra grabbed her mother's hand tightly. Saris whispered a shaky goodbye, and Rian lifted both princesses to their feet, pulling them toward the exit with urgency pounding in his veins. As they ran through the dim blue-lit tunnels, footsteps echoing behind them, dust falling from the ceiling like snow, Rian felt the entire city's fate tightening around them. They had one chance to rewrite a law older than kingdoms, one chance to expose a traitor, one chance to free themselves from a chain forged by fear and greed. And somewhere above, Veith prepared his final move, unaware that the greatest threat to his plan was not the law, not the throne, but three souls running together through the shadows. The tunnels shook around them as Rian ran with Lyra and Saris through the dim blue glow of the underspire. Every echo sounded like a warning. Every vibration felt like the city taking its last breath. Fires rumbled above them, distant screams rising through cracks in the stone. The world trembling under the weight of Veith's final push for power, but Rian didn't slow. He kept the princesses close, guiding them through the darkness with a fierce determination burning in his chest. Lyra clutched her blade as she ran, sweat mixing with dust on her forehead. Her eyes sharp despite the chaos. She knew what was at stake. She knew this wasn't just about the law anymore. It was about truth, freedom, and the future of her people. Saras stayed close to Rian, her breath shaking but her resolve stronger than ever. She carried a small data crystal pressed tightly to her chest, the Queen's encoded decree glowing faintly inside it. The decree that could rewrite a law older than empires. They reached an ancient stairwell carved into the stone, the air colder now, filled with the metallic taste of old machinery. Rian led them down to the forgotten relay station lying deep beneath the city. The doors stood silent, their frames covered in dust, symbols glowing faintly as if waking from centuries of sleep. Lyra pressed her hand against the panel, the runes lighting up in response to her royal signature. The door opened with a slow, grinding sound, revealing a chamber filled with old relay towers humming weakly like ghosts remembering life. Saras hurried to the central console, her fingers trembling as she activated the ancient systems, screens flickering to life with unstable light. "We only have one chance," she whispered. "Once we start the broadcast, Veeth will know exactly where we are." Rian placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Then we finish before he reaches us." Lyra nodded, taking her place beside them, her gaze fixed on the screens as old code streamed across them like falling stars. The tower lights brightened as Saras inserted the Queen's decree crystal into the core. The system hummed louder, the air thickening with energy. The broadcast sequence began to charge, the ancient relay linking itself to every communication band in the city, to every home screen, every public display, every military channel. Lyra whispered under her breath, shock and hope mixing in. Her voice, "If this works, the people will see everything." Rian watched the sequence climb toward completion, the numbers ticking upward like the heartbeat of destiny. 20%, 30, 50. The tower glowing brighter with each pulse. But then the ground shook violently, dust falling like rain from the ceiling. Saras gasped. "He's found us?" The distant sound of footsteps echoed through the tunnels, hundreds of them, armored, relentless, getting closer with every breath. Lyra tightened her grip on her blade, her eyes glowing with defiance. "We hold them off," she said softly. "We protect the broadcast at any cost." Rian moved to the entrance, checking his rifle, the chamber lighting up with red warning lights as the footsteps grew louder. The broadcast climbed to 60%, 70, 80. Saras worked feverishly, her hands shaking as she stabilized the old circuits, sparks flying from the machines as ancient metal clashed with modern power. Then the doors burst open in a storm of energy. Veeth's soldiers surged into the tunnel, their armor gleaming with dark sigils, weapons glowing with lethal charge. Rian fired first, the blast lighting the darkness like a bolt of lightning. Lyra leapt into the fight with a cry of fury, her blade cutting arcs of glowing blue through the smoke. Saras kept her eyes on the console even as tears slipped down her cheeks, her voice breaking with fear and determination as she called out the broadcast. "Percentage, 90, she gasped, her voice trembling. "Rian, just hold them a little longer." Rian fought with everything he had, each step pushing the soldiers back, his muscles burning, armor dented, breaths harsh. Lyra moved beside him like a streak of silver light, her strikes fast, precise, fueled by rage and love for her family. But Veeth himself stepped into the chamber, his dark robes swirling, a cruel smile on his face. "You cannot stop destiny," he said, his voice echoing like a serpent's hiss. "The law belongs to me, the throne belongs to me, and you, human, were nothing but a tool." He raised his hand, sending a surge of energy toward the relay core, sparks exploding across the room, the lights flickering. Saras cried out as the console shook, the broadcast dropping dangerously. Rian didn't hesitate, he ran straight toward Veeth, blocking the energy blast with his own body, the impact shaking him to the core, his armor cracking under the force, pain ripping through his chest like fire. But he stayed standing, he refused to fall. The broadcast climbed again, Saras screaming through tears. 98! Lyra rushed to Rian's side, her blade flashing as she countered Veeth's strike. sparks exploding as steel clashed with dark energy. She pushed him back inch by inch, her fury unmatched. Saris hit the final command with trembling fingers, her voice cracking. 100. The entire relay station erupted in light, beams of brilliant blue shooting upward through the cracks in the ceiling, racing toward the surface, bursting into the sky above the city like a second sunrise. The truth spread across every screen, every home, every mind. Veith's lies undone in an instant. Veith stared in shock as the people above cried out in outrage. Soldiers lowered their weapons. Citizens flooded the streets demanding justice. The Queen's decree echoing through the galaxy. The ancient law broken, rewritten, replaced with a new truth born from courage and sacrifice. Rian stepped forward, battered and bleeding, his voice low but unyielding. It's over. Veith lunged, but Lyra struck first, her blade slicing through his weapon, knocking him to the ground. Guards swept into the chamber moments later, seizing the fallen noble as the city's command finally shifted back under the Queen's authority. Rian sank to his knees, breath shaking, his vision blurring. Saris rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face as she held his shoulders, her voice trembling with relief. Rian, you're alive. Lyra knelt beside him, her hands cupping his face gently, her eyes shining with gratitude so deep it felt like a vow. You broke the law, she whispered. You saved us, you saved everyone. Rian smiled softly, exhausted but peaceful. I only did what was right. Later, as dawn broke over the repaired glass city, the Queen stood with her daughters on the palace terrace, Rian beside them. No chains, no law binding them anymore, only truth, only choice, only the bond forged in fire. And when Lyra took Rian's hand in hers, and Saris leaned against his shoulder with a soft smile, it was not fate, not tradition, not law that held them together. It was something deeper, freer. Something written not by ancient codes but by the heart. The galaxy whispered about the human who broke a law and saved a throne. But Rian only knew one truth. He would walk beside them wherever destiny led. Not because he was bound, but because he chose to, and they chose him,